Today's video is one that I've been excited about making for months now, and it is going to be a comprehensive start to finish timeline and details about how I got custom packaging for the first time for one of my products. I took my shower steamers from this to this, and it took a lot of work, a lot of procrastination. I mean, you don't have to do the procrastination part if you want to do it, but I certainly did. And I'm just going to talk about all the details about how I found my supplier, what the cost details were, all of the breakdown of that kind of stuff, how I figured out the design, and just the finished product I'll be talking more about. I guess the best place to start is just how did I decide to finally get custom packaging? When I started this process, I was 3 years into my business, and there were a few different reasons why I did this at this point. I've always wanted custom packaging, but I knew that it was going to be outside of my budget for a really long time. And so here's how I made that decision. The packaging I was working with was Paper Tube Company. They have these standard plain tubes in a bunch of different pre-decided sizes. So if you go on their website, they have standard tubes in white, craft, and black. And when I first decided that tubes were going to be the way to go for my shower steamers, I ordered a few different samples of sizes just to see what would work best. And their standard tube in this size was perfect for me to put 6 shower steamers in. So I was really excited about that. And I ordered a bunch of them to get started. Obviously they are plain, and so I had to print my own labels. I printed a larger label that wraps around the middle of it, and then I had this top label that I would stick right here. I have 2 scents that I make shower steamers in, so I did this whole process for my lavender shower steamers, and then these are the labels for my tea tree, eucalyptus, and mint. So that's what I was doing for a very long time, and it worked really well considering the cost of it. I would order about 150 of these at a time, and then as soon as I got to the last box of 50, I would reorder. With that order amount, I believe they were roughly $3.50 per tube, which if you're someone who makes shower steamers or any products at all, you probably realize that that's pretty expensive. It was an expensive price for the tube, but I felt like it allowed me to charge what I did charge for my shower steamers because it looked more high-end than just your average handmade product. For the first, 3 years of my business, this process worked super well. However, when we got to early summer of 2024, there had been a few instances where they were sold out of this specific tube. They had this size, but in different colors. They had white tubes in slightly larger options, and it was just sold out repeatedly a few times in a way that was really tough for my business. I had to pull the products off of Fair for a little while because I couldn't get the tubes, and I had to package them as larger options for a little while, which was fine with some of my vendors, and then others were not thrilled about that. And it's not super professional to be changing up your packaging order to order, so I was really nervous about that and really conscientious about, I don't want this to be something that I'm doing regularly. So when it had been multiple months of struggling with sold out options for the tubes, it became clear to me that this is probably the time when I just have to get custom tubes because I need to know that I'll have a bunch of them and I'll have them in stock. It was also really clear at this time that shower steamers were my best-selling product, especially as I put more effort into Fair and was working with stores. That was an easy sell for stores. In fact, if I had a new order from a new customer on Fair, it was pretty guaranteed that it was going to be shower steamers. So this was becoming my standout product, the product I was making the most of, the product that I knew was my signature product essentially. And so it was also an easy choice on that level. It was also nice to know that I only had 2 SKUs if I was switching to custom packaging. So what I mean by that is that I only have 2 fragrances in shower steamers, which means if there are minimum order quantities on custom packaging, which there always is, so that was something I had in mind, if I were doing this for my candles, I have like at least 8 candle scents available at any given time. So that's 8 different scents that I have to meet the minimum order quantity in. Whereas with the shower steamers, there's only 2 scents, which makes it a much easier order. All of these factors combined to me feeling comfortable that this was going to be worth the purchase. But I still had no idea how much it was going to cost. This is stuff that I feel like is kept pretty quiet because vendors are changing their prices for whatever reasons. This isn't easy to find information. What I did was I filled out a form for custom inquiries, and I scheduled a call with one of their salespeople. I was actually on vacation in August of 2024 and had a Zoom call with someone from Paper Tube Company. And I think honestly, she's like the best salesperson I've ever come across. Part of why she was so good was because she really had a background on my product and my history of orders with them. So obviously this would be a little bit different if I were someone who hadn't been regularly ordering with them for a few years and I was coming with no background. I'm sure there'd be less information there. But my biggest questions were obviously pricing and also the process of how this happens. But in terms of pricing, their minimum order quantities were 1,000 units each. I do believe that information was available on their website, but I hadn't really processed through how that translated. And so when I was a little bit hesitant about that number, I had previously only ordered 150 tubes at a time. And it just felt like really big, felt like a really big commitment, which made me nervous. But because she had all this information handy, she said to me, "You have already purchased 1,000 tubes with us this year." And I'll remind you, we're talking in August. Holiday season is my busiest season, especially with steamers. It was shower steamers. So I hadn't even hit my busy season for the year, and I had already gone through 1,000 tubes in this calendar year. So that selling point was super important. It made it such an easy yes, because what she was telling me was, you're gonna go through 1,000 tubes within a year. It's definitely worth that order, because that to me feels like a reasonable turnover rate for making a purchase like that. So that, she nailed it. The other benefit that she told me about in that sales call that I think was another selling point was that she explained to me that even with the cost of shipping, the price per tube would be at least $1 less per tube than I was already paying. So even though I had to invest more money up front because I was paying for a large quantity, these custom tubes would cost me less per unit than the standard tubes I was getting that would look less professional. So that was another selling point. You need to have the capital to make the investment, but that was really exciting to me, that I would be lowering my cost of goods while making them look more expensive. She was also really great with the process. This was going to take a while. I knew that when we had the conversation, because there were weeks at a time between when I would submit my design and when they would get a sample sent to me. And then after I approved the sample, I think it was going to be like 8 to 12 weeks before the actual shipment would arrive to me. So this was something I knew wasn't going to happen within 2024, which was kind of a bummer, but I just figured, let's get it started now and it's ready when it's ready. So once I was convinced that this was the right thing to do, I agreed to their proposal and I put a deposit down for half of the amount. And then the next step that they had told me about was that they wanted me to send them my product, like a product sample of the tubes that I was already using with product in it. So they obviously knew what these blank tubes were like because they come from them. But I filled it with shower steamers and sent it to them. And then also I ordered 1,000 units of reed diffuser tubes. And so I sent them my current reed diffuser setup with the product in it. So that was my first thing. They're close by, like I mentioned, they're in Chicago, so it got to them quickly. They reviewed it, and once they felt like they had a firm grip on my products, they sent me die lines. Die lines are essentially a template for the product dimensions that you are asking for your packaging. So it's a 2-dimensional template, and that was how I was going to communicate the design that I wanted to them. One thing I also want to mention about the design is that they do have in-house design services, and she talked with me about that on the sales call. However, it was going to be thousands of dollars additionally to do the design, and that was not in my budget. I'm also lucky enough that I feel like I have a pretty strong background in designing my own packaging. I didn't go to school for graphic design, but I've been doing it at various jobs essentially since like my early 20s. So it's been a long time of me doing design on my own. And I felt like I could figure it out myself, especially considering that the alternative is like thousands of dollars more. So that's why they sent me the guidelines to start, because I was going to do the design myself. They recommend that you design things in Adobe Illustrator. That's their preferred program. But I actually did everything in Canva. There were some things I had to tweak because of Canva's functionality, but I just want to offer up that it did work for me to design these in Canva. I have since started custom packaging with a local printer on something smaller, and the same situation happened there where they prefer Adobe Illustrator. I just don't want to spend extra money on something like that, and I've done all of my design work in Canva so far, and I was able to make it work in this instance again. Once I had the guideline, I had to start making some decisions about what is this tube actually going to look like. It was something I had thought about a lot, but actually translating a sort of general vibe into a specific design was super intimidating and overwhelming. And in fact, I do think that I sort of like shut down for a little bit on it. Because of the timing of that call, I hit my busiest season shortly after that. So getting through the holidays, I feel like I didn't think about it. It was something I wanted to make progress on, but I also felt so stuck, and so there was so much pressure to get it perfect because I was ordering 1,000 of these tubes. I really wanted it to be good. And so I messed around with a lot of different stuff. I think I could do a whole separate video on how I find inspiration for my designs. I don't want to get into it too much here because I think it is its own video. But I do the very standard, like looking on Pinterest. I try to look outside of my industry. My go-to for inspiration, honestly, for any sort of packaging thing is the alcohol and beverage industry. I feel like they put a lot of money into design and a lot of market research into design. And so that's always a go-to for me. And I feel like it kind of translates because the shape of a liquor bottle is also the shape of a tube. So to me, that's just like a broad where I start. But I knew that I wanted the botanical elements. That's been consistent for pretty much all of my packaging. I think it's something that is important to my brand, and especially on a product where 100% essential oils are the fragrance used for it. I think it's even more important to highlight that, and botanical artwork to me helps communicate that aspect of the product. So I knew I wanted that. I came up with the initial design that was like very simple, so pretty. I really loved it. And I sent it to them as sort of an initial review just to be like, am I in the right direction? And they did provide me with really helpful feedback, which was I had wanted, okay, I'm going to open this line. So the top comes off like that. I had wanted I wanted artwork that went from the bottom to the top to connect it together. I think it looks so nice when that happens, and it's also something you can only easily do with custom packaging. So I really wanted to exploit that feature. So I had like this big oval that had text up here, text down here, and sort of connected the whole thing. But the feedback that they gave me was that the text up here was in a like danger zone for printing. They obviously need a little wiggle room on the edges of these tubes. And so they said, you know, if you have it go over the line like this, it might mess up your logo a little bit. So I went back to the drawing board. I did so many iterations. I feel like I was messing around with this forever. It took me so long to finish this design. The paper tube company people, I have nothing but amazing things to say about them. They were so patient with me as I took forever to design this. And so they just kept following up very patiently, and I would always be like, still working on it, still struggling. I did finally get to two options that I felt pretty good about, and I'm going to show you something real quick. Something I would do, because the die line for me was a little bit hard to visualize because it was two-dimensional, and this is a rounded tube. I would print off just like a paper, regular printer paper, and like tape it around an existing tube to sort of get an idea of, is this doing what I want it to do? Is this looking how I want it to look? So these are ripped because I tried to get them off of here and it wouldn't work, but I did this with 2 different options, and I sent the photos to a group chat of mine of a bunch of female business owners, a lot of whom own aesthetic focused businesses who I trust really. I have a lot of trust in, and they pretty much unanimously agreed on the one that I liked the best too, which is the finished one. And so I submitted what I needed to submit. There were tweaks on the delivery of the files, which I think only happened because I am not a professional designer. I've never done this before. So this was a little bit of back and forth with them letting me know, like, hey, this stuff needs to be saved differently or exported differently, I guess is a better way to say it. But there was some of that back and forth, but ultimately I got the approval from their design team and they sent it off to have the samples made. I still remember what it felt like to get that box that I knew was the samples of these custom tubes. It was honestly a really emotional moment for me because this felt like a stage of my business that I had been dreaming about for a while. This feels like a much more official moment in a business than anything I had done before. And I just felt really emotional about it. And then I opened the box and these samples were stunning. It was so exciting. They looked so expensive. I knew that I could charge more for them once I had upgraded these tubes. I had been waiting to increase prices on shower steamers for a while. This felt like a natural transition, and how easy to increase a price when the product looks more expensive. One thing worth mentioning, I'm going to open this giant thing. So they had sent me samples of my Reed diffuser tube and then samples of the lavender shower steamer tubes, I think. And then they also sent these, which were, there's like a few of them. They're all the same, I think. But it gave you, they didn't send a sample of the tea tree tube. And so these papers were basically a stand-in to show like color quality and just print quality, that this is what it would look like without giving me the actual tube. I think it's because they'd have to do a whole separate run if they were doing samples of the other tea tree tube. So maybe if I had paid extra for that, like if I had wanted the tubes here to start doing product photos and promoting the upcoming tubes, I'm sure I could have asked for that and probably paid extra for that. But I did have these papers that confirmed for me that like the colors all looked great. It made me so excited to get the tubes. And so I did message them right away and say, approved, start production. And I think after that approval, it was like 8 to 12 weeks of waiting for the finished tubes. Unfortunately for me, what happened between getting those dye lines and submitting my artwork is that we had an election in this country, and our new president, who I did not vote for, decided that tariffs on all Chinese manufactured goods would be like 145%. That timing happened at the absolute worst moment for me with this product, because they did eventually get walked back, but that was after I had already placed this order. And because of the amount of the order, I paid $1,500 just in tariffs for these tubes to arrive. So you can understand how I was pretty upset about that. Nothing Paper Tube Company could do about it. The only real comforting fact about that is that because I had saved like $1 per tube by ordering this large quantity custom, the tariff cost essentially just brought the cost of the tubes back up to what I was spending for the old tubes. So it wasn't necessarily that the tubes were now more expensive, but the whole point of me investing all of this money was to have a smaller cost of goods, and that went away for this round. I'm hoping that future rounds this isn't an issue. Just something that I thought is interesting because it speaks to the unpredictability of owning a small business and the importance of having some wiggle room financially, because talk about something I couldn't have foreseen when I was taking all this time to design it, which had I designed it faster, could have avoided all of this. I'm not going to blame myself. I know who to blame for this, but it feels a little bit like some of the other unprecedented events we've had recently and how tough it can be on business owners to have to just take those costs in. And I didn't talk about it much on social media. I didn't really know what would be happening in the future. And I didn't want to be like, oh, poor me. I know that I still got off really easy compared to other people who've had to deal with much worse. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but it's something that I just think is like an interesting tidbit about the story. So that's why I'm sharing it now. And then finally, these tubes arrived. I'm so happy with the finished product. I think they look so nice, and sitting on a shelf, I'm really proud of the finished product and how beautiful they are. I think it makes them even more fun to gift to somebody else. I just think this was exactly what I was hoping for when I sought out custom packaging. So how exciting for that to actually turn out the way you want. There's so many things where you have an idea of your mind of what this experience will be like, and it's completely different. And this was exactly what I wanted. I'm so happy with them. I took product photos. I put them up for pre-order on Faire as soon as I could and got a great response. Got a great response from people on social media, and it absolutely reinforced for me how valuable custom packaging actually is. The time that this saves me in production is also important, because I talk about like $1 less per tube for the actual cost of the tube, but the labor it takes to package up the shower steamers is significantly less. These labels that I was doing before, not only do I have to stop and print these off, which I know doesn't sound like a crazy labor-intensive thing, and it's not. However, God forbid the printer isn't connected to the internet because the internet's being flaky. The ink cartridge is low and I can't find a replacement. We're just having like a finicky day technology-wise. It can mess all of that up, and then I have to sit here and meticulously apply every single tube. And I was also noticing that depending on the humidity, these tubes would show up and maybe have like a little warping in the label, which is again not ideal. It doesn't look super professional. That'll never happen with these. And it's just so fast to package them up. I really enjoy it now. So now I'm thinking about like what's next, which packaging can I do next? I guess I did mention a little bit that I'm already working on something else. You guys will see that soon. Again, shout out Paper Tube Company. They don't just do tubes. If you're just looking for custom boxes, also they do all kinds of stuff, and they're so great to work with. I really enjoyed this process. It was much less intimidating than I expected. They never treated me like an amateur. There was no condescension, nothing. I really loved this experience. I'm so grateful for it, and I hope that this was helpful to see what went into this whole experience. If you have questions, please comment below. I tried to cover as much as I could, but I'm sure there's stuff that I'm forgetting or didn't think about. And other than that, I will see you in the next video.